appear to be strained as Ghana evacuates hundreds of its citizens from South Africa amid reports of alleged xenophobic violence, intimidation, and anti-immigrant protests. Now, the move has triggered a war of words between the two countries' foreign affairs ministers. Meanwhile, Ghana's MP for Okaikwei Central, Patrick Yaw Boamah, has called for an urgent briefing from Foreign Affairs Minister Samuel Okudzeto Ablakwa on the safety of Ghanaians and the planned evacuation process. And to help us shed light on this topic, we are joined by Wilberforce Asare, head of political and legal desk and host of Press Pass. Now, Wilberforce, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on Africa Update.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, how have the public exchanges between Ghana's Foreign Minister Samuel Okudzeto Ablakwa and South African officials affected diplomatic efforts to de-escalate tensions?
Well, so that's a very good question. And the reason why I say so is because Ghana and South Africa have a very long-standing relationship. And in spite of previous xenophobic attacks that have happened in the past, the two governments have maintained their relationships, which has culminated in the presidents of Ghana coming up on state visits to South Africa with South African heads of state, the last being the current president, Cyril Ramaphosa, also visiting Ghana for purposes of diplomatic engagement. And so with the current happenings, it is drawing a lot of concern and attention from persons in the executive and also in the legislative arm of government here in our country. Some civil society organizations and pressure groups have also been concerned that in spite of the fact that, yes, there are xenophobic attacks happening in South Africa against several other African nationals, it is not a reason for the diplomatic relationship between Ghana and South Africa to be derailed because you are attempting to rescue or to save your nationals in another country. And so, yes, there's been major concerns in the country about how this particular development is being handled by the current government and also by the current foreign minister. And that is what I can say about the concerns that are being raised as far as the developments between the two countries, South Africa and Ghana, are concerned.
Now, what does MP Patrick Yaw Boamah's call for an urgent briefing suggest about domestic political pressure on the Ghanaian government?
Well, yeah, so Patrick Boamah is a member of parliament on the minority side of things. That means that he is part of the opposition in parliament. Now, in Ghana, it is standard procedure that every time you are engaging with international partners and what have you, parliament needs to be aware. In fact, we operate a dual system of approval so that if you enter into an international agreement as a government, that agreement must be ratified by our parliament before it can be implemented. And so Patrick Boamah's request essentially for the minority in parliament is to say that, well, the parliament has noticed that the government is engaging in some activities that are external or for that matter, are related to South Africa. There is a need for the entire parliament to be briefed on exactly the steps that are being taken, even up to the cost that the country is bearing as far as these evacuations are concerned and all that. So indeed, Patrick Boamah's request from parliament is standard procedure. It is something that our parliament does every now and then. And if the current government were in opposition, they would have done the same by demanding that those in government come and brief the House about the developments that are going on between South Africa and Ghana. Now, the minority side in the House is also concerned about the fact that there are a lot of South African businesses that are operating in Ghana, and they do not want these developments to have any negative effect or draw any negative energy on these organizations that operate in Ghana. And that is because if these companies that operate in Ghana, which emanate from South Africa, have any challenges, it go a long way to affect the Ghanaian economy. And so you can talk about MTN, which is operating in Ghana. You can talk about DSTV, which is operating in Ghana. And all of these offer services. In fact, MTN is the biggest mobile phone network operator in Ghana. And so as much as there are diplomatic concerns and xenophobic concerns that are happening, you are also mindful of the economic impact that any action or inaction can have on the Ghanaian economy. And that is the reason why the minority is asking that the executive arm of government, and for that matter, the Minister for Foreign Affairs, should make himself available to the House, make a statement, and give a briefing exactly what is happening and what the government is doing to ensure that there are no diplomatic backlashes between the two countries while trying to deal with an existential problem.
Now, we've seen, social media playing a major being used as a major platform in some of the posts that have been made by whether it's ministers and parliamentarians. Just take us through that, where we saw the South African International Relations Minister also then responding on social media platform, and just what that does to communities, whether the citizens in Ghana and the citizens in South Africa.
Well, yes, so that is an issue of concern, and I can tell you for a fact that those social media engagements that have gone on has raised a lot of concerns. In fact, it is one of the reasons why the minority in Parliament has even found it necessary to make the demand for the Minister for Foreign Affairs to come to the House and to make a statement before Parliament. But, I think that the Minister for International Relations or International Cooperations from South Africa, when he engaged a local radio station here in Ghana, did indicate that the South African government is very worried and concerned about the xenophobic attacks, and that the government is doing everything within its power to ensure that those xenophobic attacks stop and do not continue. He also talked about some plan for compensation on case-by-case basis if there is any Ghanaian who has been evacuated who may have lost anything. Once your case is made and it is strong, due compensation will be paid. So yes, that intervention by the South African official was good and upright. However, because of the very history of South Africa and also the history of Ghana, South Africa's history because of the issues of apartheid and how that the African continent rallied around South Africa to protect minority rights, or to protect, in fact, this one was to protect majority rights, and for that matter, the rights of blacks. Some Africans think that South Africa should be indebted to the rest of Africa, and South Africa should not be seen as fighting other African countries or other African compatriots. And so it is the very history of South Africa, which has everything to do with apartheid, that has necessitated some of the reactions that you are seeing on social media. I can tell you that some of the reactions on social media are quite wild, and that's because in Ghana we have a very active community on social media.
Wilberforce, unfortunately, we have run out of time, and we have to end it there. I wish we had more time, but thank you so much for joining us on Africa Update.
Thank you.
Press pass joining us on the line.
When the sun goes down, we don't stop the talk.